Hello everyone, I'm Sue Williams and I'm here to encourage you to paint a poppy for the SAA Paint a Poppy Challenge. So I'm going to start on a 5-inch square to paint my poppy. And I'm going to think about the arrangement on the paper because being greedy, I'd like to have more than one poppy. I'd like to have several poppies. I'm bearing in mind that the poppy is a teacup shape, and so I want to express some of that in my painting and in my drawing. So I'm looking at the top petal, and I'm going to try and make this fairly large so that it takes up a lot of the space of the paper, and it gives me room to put another poppy in a little bit further down the paper. So there's my centre, and there's my first poppy coming in with its centre. Here I'm looking to paint more of a cup shape to get the next poppy, and that might only be about half as big as my main poppy. It's surprising how small things get as we go back into the picture, and we'll have another teacup shape perhaps back here. A lot of it will be done with the paint, so I'm only indicating quickly with the pencil. Now I've got quite a few colours here, and I've got quinacridone magenta and phthalo blue and cerulean blue. I'm going to put some of those into the background because we sometimes have other colours in a poppy field. It's not just about the greens of the grass. We may see it against the sky. We may have other flowers. Now this is quinacridone magenta, which is this lovely brilliant colour, and you can probably see I'm painting quite wet. It dripped all over the paper there. But I'm trying to get this to have some lights and shades within the way that the paint is going on. And as I'm bringing it down, I'd like to introduce some cadmium lemon, which is, again, a beautiful colour. And this will be the beginning of maybe a hint of where we may have some greens coming into the painting. So the yellow coming down here. Now I'm going around the poppy, and I'm going to paint the poppy later on, but with these poppies up here, if they mingle a little bit into the background wash, it doesn't matter too much at all because the red is quite strong that we're going to use, and that will push that out of the way. So I've got some cerulean blue coming in here, and in fact I might make this poppy just a little bit bigger as the painting progresses. So that's my background painted, and my foreground just starting to come in. So I'm mixing my green from lemon and phthalo blue now to make, say, a stronger blue, just a tiny touch of burnt sienna in it. So it's going to give me a stronger colour for my foreground. So it's still very wet in wet. So any marks I put on here are going to merge. But when we see poppies, they're amongst grass, they're amongst insects, and they're amongst maybe wheat or other plants that have a brownish quality to them. So as I'm putting this in with thicker colour into the very wet, so it's starting to merge. And I'm thinking about seeds and the grasses that we may see. And I don't want it to be too static. I'd like it to have some movement in it as well. So I'm mixing a little bit more burnt sienna into the lemon and the phthalo blue red shade. And you can see it's all still quite wet, but it's giving me some background colours, and I don't want to cover everything. This is only a small painting, so I'm keeping it quite free. Of course, you might like to do a miniature and do a very beautiful small botanical painting on a surface like this. Now I'm going to bring in a touch of red into this. I've got a piece of kitchen roll here which allow me to wipe some of the colour off of my brush. So I'm going to wash the brush, and before I go into the red, I'm going to just wipe the brush so that it's not too wet, because I really like the red to be opaque enough, thick enough to be able to push the colour out of the way as I put it on. So I'm putting this red in here. Some of the paper there was white, but this is thick enough to just move into the colour and push it out of the way. I'm bringing one over here that will go off the edge of the paper, just wetting the brush, drying the brush slightly to carry on. Now I'm keeping these ones in the background quite red, but as I come forward, I'd like to change the colour. I'm going to put a tiny touch of water onto this one so the paper is quite wet, and then allows me to put really thick, almost out of the tube thickness of the red, so that the thick paint that's coming out of the tube will mingle in to the colour that's there. So I'm going to leave that because all of that's quite wet and it's just beginning to evaporate, it's just beginning to dry, which means that the surface is slightly delicate. Having said that, I'm going to just bring a touch of that blue down here just to connect it through to that poppy. Now I'm going to use Indian yellow. Now Indian yellow is a lovely sunshine colour, quite transparent and quite bright. Beautiful colour, ideal for cornfields. And I'm going to underpaint this poppy with some yellow. The poppies seem to vary wherever you live in the country, and we see quite pinkish poppies sometimes, quite orange poppies, and obviously the usual cadmium red poppies as well. So this one is more of the orange variety of poppy. Varieties change as well in size. You know, some poppies have really got big heads to them, and some are really quite small and delicate and about half the size. So again, it's what's native in your area really, what grows there. So you can see I put a pink and a yellow on here, and I want to get the feeling of the teacup. So that yellow is going to help me sculpt the poppy, and I've got a slightly frilly skirt coming out as well here, so I'm going to put a little bit of yellow back on there. So I've underpainted it, and that means that this poppy is going to be brighter and it's going to be my foreground poppy. So meanwhile the background is beginning to dry and settle, and I'll be able to come back and work into that. So I'm really working this almost as one wet in wet. So a few more marks into here. Now I've got the burnt sienna here, a touch of the Indian yellow, and that gives me a colour that's a sort of orangey brown. It's not quite like raw sienna, it's a beautiful colour, but I'm just going to have a little bit of that coming in the background as well, as if it were some seed heads coming through here. I need something just to come through here as well. So you see, this is only going to take 10 minutes to paint. So for your 10 minutes challenge, it's the same thing. You may be able to paint a picture at your local art group and have a challenge there, be able to everyone have a try and see how you get on in 10 minutes or 20 minutes, see what you can accomplish in that time. So I'm thinking, sometimes there's horizontal marks as well when you see poppies that you don't know quite what this growth might be in the background. We've got very fine stem on the poppies, and I don't want to overdo that. I just want to hint at it. Now the main poppy. So before my 10 minutes is up, I'm going to get my main poppy in, and that has stripy sort of feeling to it as the petals come down, because they're so folded and pleated when they're in the bud. When the bud unravels, you still get this sense of the folds and the pleats that it had when it was so tightly packed. So I'm painting some of these folds. I'm going to just wet the brush so I've got less colour on the brush, and I'm softening the colour with a drop of water. So that's going to blend in. So I'm hoping that the yellow will just glow through. It won't be a yellow poppy, it'll be a red poppy, but with this glow of light coming through it, and I'll need to put some shadow on it as well. So under here, I'm leaving this petal that's catching the light, this pinky petal catching the light. I'm going to leave that pretty much unpainted. If it was an hour long we had to paint on this, obviously we could do a lot more work on it and build it up a lot more. But I'm trying to get that lovely crumpled feeling that they have. Now for the shadows are tricky really with flowers, because we think, what colour shall I use? Now I'm going to use the permanent magenta, that little bit of bright pink I had up in that top corner, and I'm going to mix that in with the cadmium red, and I'm just going to colour inside the teacup, as it were. So it's just going to give me a little bit of dark that takes the feeling of the poppy in. 1 or 2 stripes again in here. the permanent magenta again underneath. Now, if you need to go darker, you add a tiny touch of blue into the magenta and the red, because that will give you a purple, and the purple is really good mixed with scarlet or mixed with cadmium red, which is what I've got here. So that's just giving me a little fold through here. The centre, I'm going to use, I've got some burnt sienna and some phthalo blue and some cadmium red. And the phthalo blue and the cadmium red will go pretty much black. And although poppies all vary, some have got a black centre, some have got a green centre, but we all have this thing that it really is our focal point. It's almost like the eyes of the flower looking at us. Now it's still a little bit wet, and I'm just putting one or two of the anthers and stamens in around here, a few little dots and dashes. I've got to make sure that the stem links through to the middle as it comes down, and it is really wobbly, the stem, and I'm just going to pick up a touch more yellow into that poppy centre mix, which makes a nice olive green, because I've got that very strong centre. I'd really like one or two dark marks coming in here, so the paint now has got thicker, and so it's a little bit darker because it's thicker, but I'd just like to get this feeling of one or two grasses at the bottom blowing around in the breeze. I quite like that light colour behind the poppy, so I might leave that. Just mixing up a soft green, not too strong a green, just to come through here as well. Just want to break up that background. Now, if we have time, we can put poppy buds into it. We can put those gorgeous little seed heads that are such a beautiful shape just on their own to paint. They're so lovely. But really, I think this one is almost there. And I'd be really, really interested to see what you do and what you do with your poppy on this SAA challenge. So don't forget, see if you can get your art club involved as well, because it'd be wonderful if we can all take part in this challenge and all do something. Just one bit and then I'm finished. Okay, so there's my finished poppy painting. You can get involved and help us raise money for the Royal British Legion by painting your own poppy too. So together, let's paint, donate and remember.